Amelie stood under the soft glow of golden lights that spilled across the marble floors of her family's mansion in Cape Town. Laughter, champagne glasses, and expensive perfume filled the air. Tonight was supposed to be her night, the celebration of her inheritance. Her late father's business shares, worth more than $50 million, were now officially hers. Guests surrounded her with smiles and congratulations, calling her the future of the Duma legacy. Her mother, Lindy, stood at the center of it all, flawless in a shimmering gold gown that matched the decor. She lifted her glass and said proudly, "To my brilliant daughter, who will continue her father's legacy." Everyone cheered, but Amelie noticed something strange. As the room erupted in applause, her mother's lawyer leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Lindy nodded slightly, her smile never fading. Amelie felt a flicker of unease. The whole night felt too polished, too planned. Every speech, every compliment seemed rehearsed. Even her mother's warmth felt practiced, like a performance meant for the crowd. When Amelie tried to ask what the lawyer had said, Lindy just laughed it off, brushing her shoulder affectionately. "Don't worry about business tonight, darling," she said. "Just enjoy your moment." But as the music played and the champagne flowed, Amelie couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Beneath the glitter and celebration, there was a quiet tension she couldn't name. She smiled for the cameras, but deep down, a small voice whispered that this night wasn't just about her success. It was the beginning of something else entirely. Later that night, when the last guests had left and the mansion was quiet again, Lindy called Amelie into her study. The room smelled faintly of her mother's favorite jasmine candle and old leather books. The walls were lined with framed photos, family portraits, magazine covers, her father shaking hands with business leaders. Amelie always felt small in that room, like a guest instead of a daughter. Lindy was sitting behind her mahogany desk, her posture straight and elegant. "Come, my love," she said softly, waving Amelie over. "There's just a bit of paperwork for the board to finalize your shares. Nothing complicated." She smiled, her tone light, almost playful. On the desk lay a stack of documents clipped neatly together, pages filled with dense text and numbers that seemed to blur under the lamp's light. Amelie sat down and began to flip through them. The words were heavy with legal language she didn't fully understand. Clauses, authorizations, transfer rights, signatory. "This looks complicated," she murmured, frowning. Her mother chuckled gently, taking a sip of her wine. "Darling, it's standard procedure. The board just needs confirmation that everything's in your name now. You know how slow these lawyers can be." Still, something about it made Amelie's stomach twist. "Maybe I should have Mr. Daniels look at it," she said, referring to her father's old lawyer who had always been kind to her. But Lindy's smile tightened ever so slightly. "You don't trust your own mother?" she asked softly, the question landing like a challenge. Her voice was calm, but her eyes had a sharpness that made Amelie feel foolish for even suggesting it. "I do, Mama," she said quickly, setting down the papers. "Of course I do." Lindy leaned forward, her tone turning warm again. "Good. Then just sign here and here. It's late, and I'd rather not bother the board with delays." Amelie picked up the pen. Her hand hovered for a moment, heart thumping. Every instinct told her to wait, to read it again, to ask someone, anyone, what it really meant. But her mother's eyes were on her, patient but expectant. So she pushed the doubt aside and signed her name where Lindy pointed. Once. Twice. The pen glided smoothly over the paper. When she handed it back, Lindy's expression softened into satisfaction. "That's my girl," she said, standing to kiss Amelie on the forehead. "Your father would be so proud." She gathered the papers quickly and placed them into a folder, tucking it neatly into her desk drawer. Amelie smiled faintly, though unease still lingered in her chest. As she left the study and closed the heavy wooden door behind her, she glanced back one last time. Through the narrow crack, she saw her mother still at the desk, phone pressed to her ear, whispering something with a smirk. Amelie brushed it off, convincing herself it was nothing. She had no idea that the signature she'd just written had changed everything. The next morning started like any other. Sunlight poured through the white curtains of Amelie's penthouse bedroom, and the sound of waves from the Cape Town coast filled the air. She stretched lazily, feeling the afterglow of last night's celebration. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, first once, then over and over. Notifications flooded the screen. At first, she smiled, thinking they were more congratulations. But as she scrolled, her stomach dropped. There were multiple emails from her bank, her company, even her lawyer, each one marked urgent. The first message read, "Account access suspended." The next said, "Your login credentials have been changed." One after another, all saying the same thing, "Access denied." Amelie sat up quickly, heart pounding. She tried logging into her investment account, typing her password again and again. Incorrect. She tried her business email. Locked. Even her personal credit card was declined when she attempted a small online payment. It didn't make sense. Everything had been fine just hours ago. Panicking, she called her financial advisor, Sifo, the man who had worked with her father for years. When he answered, his tone was shaky, almost afraid. "Emily, I've been trying to reach you. What's going on?" she asked, her voice tight. "Why can't I access anything?" There was a pause on the other end. Then, quietly, he said, "Your mother came in early this morning with signed documents. The ones you both signed last night. They authorize her as the sole controller of your father's business shares, your trusts, and linked accounts. Everything has been transferred to her name." Emily froze. "What do you mean everything?" she whispered. "Everything, Emily," he said, his voice breaking. "Legally, she owns it all now. You signed the rights over to her." The words hit her like a punch to the chest. Her breath came in short gasps. She could barely process what he was saying. "No," she said weakly. "She told me it was for the board, just routine paperwork." "I'm so sorry," Sifo said softly. "Once the documents are registered, there's nothing we can reverse without her consent." Emily felt the room spinning. She dropped her phone onto the bed, staring at the view outside, the same view she'd admired every morning since her father's passing. The ocean looked calm, almost mocking. She thought of her mother's smile the night before, the whispering with the lawyer, the gentle way she'd said, "You don't trust your own mother?" Her chest tightened as the truth sank in. The woman she loved, the one who raised her, had stolen everything. Not by force, but legally, cleanly, cleverly. Emily sat there in silence, tears sliding down her cheeks. The mansion, the cars, the accounts, the future she thought she had, all gone overnight. And worst of all, she realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was a lesson her mother had planned long before the celebration ever began. Emily didn't even bother knocking. She pushed open the heavy wooden doors to her mother's office, so hard they banged against the wall. Lindy looked up slowly from behind her polished desk, her expression calm, as if she had been expecting her. Emily's heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she marched forward, gripping the signed documents in her trembling hand. She slammed the papers down in front of her mother. "You used me," she shouted, her voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "You made me sign everything over to you." Lindy didn't flinch. She simply leaned back in her chair, eyes cool and composed. "Lower your voice," she said softly, as if Emily were a child throwing a tantrum. "Don't tell me to calm down." Emily snapped. "You stole my inheritance, Mama. You lied to me." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Why would you do this to your own daughter?" Lindy folded her hands neatly on the desk. "Because you're not ready," she said in a tone so controlled it made Emily's skin crawl. "You think wealth is just about having money. It's about power, strategy, control. Everything your father built, I built too. You're not strong enough to handle it yet." Emily stared at her, stunned. "Not strong enough?" she said, her voice trembling. "You betrayed me. You manipulated me. That's not strength, Mama. That's greed." Lindy tilted her head slightly, almost amused. "You'll understand one day. I protected what's ours. When you learn how this world really works, maybe then I'll let you have it back." "Let me," Emily repeated, her anger rising again. "You took everything my father wanted me to have. You've always treated his company like it was yours alone." Lindy's smile faded. "Your father was a dreamer," she said quietly. "I was the one who made those dreams real. Without me, there would be nothing to inherit." Emily took a shaky breath, tears forming in her eyes, but her voice grew steadier. "You taught me to never beg, Mama. Remember that." Lindy's lips curved into a faint, cold smile. "Then don't," she said, her tone almost gentle. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, the daughter burning with betrayal, the mother unbothered, untouchable. Finally, Emily turned and walked out, her heels echoing through the empty hallway. She didn't look back. As she stepped outside, the mansion that once felt like home now looked like a stranger's house, cold, distant, and full of lies. That was the last time Emily ever set foot in it. She left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the fire in her chest, vowing silently that one day, her mother would regret underestimating. The fall came faster than Emily ever imagined. Within days, her life unraveled piece by piece. The first blow was her apartment, a luxury penthouse overlooking the ocean that had once felt like freedom. The bank froze her accounts, and without proof of ownership, she couldn't pay a single bill. Within a week, she was told to leave. The same security guards who used to greet her politely now avoided her eyes as she packed her things into 2 suitcases and walked out. Her phone, once buzzing nonstop with calls and invitations, went silent. Friends who used to beg to party with her stopped answering. Some unfollowed her online. Others sent short, awkward messages. "I'm so sorry, hope things get better," and disappeared. The same people who once called her inspiring acted like they'd never known her. When she tried calling her mother, the number was blocked. She sent messages, emails, even a handwritten letter, all ignored. The woman who once called her my brilliant daughter had erased her completely. Emily moved into a small hostel in Soweto, far from the world she used to know. The room was barely big enough for a bed and a small desk. The air smelled of old paint and shared cooking oil from the communal kitchen. At night, she could hear the hum of the city outside, the laughter of strangers who had no idea who she used to be. Her days were long and quiet. She spent hours on her old laptop, applying for jobs, finance firms, consulting agencies, startups, but no one called back. Her name no longer carried power. Without her father's company behind it, she was just another job seeker in a crowded inbox. Most nights, she sat by the window eating cheap takeaways, staring at the skyline in silence. She replayed the moment she signed those papers again and again in her mind, the pen in her hand, her mother's soft voice saying, "You don't trust your own mother?" The memory burned like acid. Sometimes anger kept her awake, sometimes sadness. But every single night, before she closed her eyes, she whispered the same words to herself. "I'll rebuild what she stole, and I'll do it better." She didn't know how yet. She had no plan, no money, no contacts. But somewhere deep inside, something had changed. The pain that once made her feel weak began to harden into determination. Her mother might have taken her inheritance, but she hadn't taken her will to fight. And so, even in that tiny room with flickering lights and peeling paint, Amelie made a promise to herself. This wasn't the end. It was the start of her comeback. Amelie started small, with nothing but an old laptop, a cheap ring light, and her story. Sitting on the edge of her hostel bed, she recorded short videos about money, how to save, how to read contracts, how to spot financial scams. She spoke in simple, honest language, using her own mistakes as lessons. "If it sounds too good to be true," she said in one video, "it probably is. Even if it comes from someone you love." At first, only a handful of people watched. But something about her raw honesty began to connect with viewers. Her videos didn't sound like lectures. They sounded like heart-to-heart talks. She didn't pretend to be perfect. She shared the truth about losing everything and the hard climb to get back up. Slowly, her audience grew. Comments poured in from people across South Africa saying things like, "You've helped me avoid the same mistake," and "No one ever explained money like this before." Amelie named her platform Rooted Wealth. She said the name reminded her that true wealth wasn't flashy. It was grounded, stable, and built from the roots up. Every week, she posted new videos, hosted live Q&As, and shared free resources. She taught domestic workers how to manage their savings, small business owners how to read contracts, and young professionals how to build financial independence. Her message was clear. Power begins with knowledge. Within 2 years, Rooted Wealth exploded. What began as a one-woman project turned into a movement. Media outlets invited her to speak. Companies hired her to teach financial literacy workshops. She was featured on TV shows, radio interviews, and podcasts. Her followers grew into the millions across Africa, and investors started reaching out. This time, she was the one setting the term. Amelie worked tirelessly, but every new success felt personal. She rented her own small office, hired a young team, and built partnerships with banks and schools. For the first time in years, she felt free. No one could take this from her. It was hers alone. One evening, as she stood in front of her new office window overlooking Johannesburg's skyline, she thought of her mother. Lindy had always said she wasn't ready, that she didn't deserve control. But Amelie had proven her wrong. She had built something real, without shortcuts, lies, or inherited wealth. She became the woman her mother never wanted her to be, independent, powerful, and unstoppable. And deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. Rooted Wealth wasn't just her comeback, it was her legacy in motion. One morning, Amelie woke up to a message that made her freeze. It was from her family's old accountant, a man who had worked with her father for decades, but hadn't spoken to her in years. The text was short. "Your mother's in trouble. The tax authority is investigating her. It's bad." Amelie read it twice, her heart beating slowly, almost cautiously. She sat up in bed, staring at the message, unsure how to feel. It had been years since she'd spoken to her mother. Years since the betrayal. But now it seemed karma had finally caught up. Curiosity got the best of her, and she called the accountant. His voice sounded older, tired. "Amelie," he said softly, "I thought you should know. The company is falling apart. Your mother made risky deals, hid money offshore, tried to outsmart everyone, including the government. They're closing in. It's only a matter of time before everything collapses." Amelie listened in silence. She could almost picture it, her mother sitting in her grand office, surrounded by luxury, still pretending to be in control, while everything burned around her. "How bad is it?" she finally asked. "Bad," he said. "She's lost most of her investors. There are audits, lawsuits, debts. The empire she tried to keep from you, it's gone." When the call ended, Amelie sat quietly for a long time. Outside her window, the city moved as usual. People rushed to work, taxis honked, life went on. Inside, she felt something unexpected. Not joy, not revenge, just a strange calm. Justice had done what she couldn't. She remembered her mother's words the night of the confrontation. I built everything your father left. But now it was clear she had also destroyed it. Lindau's hunger for power had turned everything her family built into dust. Later that day, Amelie opened her laptop and searched her mother's name. Headlines flashed across the screen. Duma Holdings under investigation. CEO Lindau Duma faces financial scandal. The woman who once stood proudly on magazine covers was now being torn apart in the news. Amelie closed her laptop and took a deep breath. There was no satisfaction in seeing her mother's downfall, only a quiet understanding that life had finally balanced itself out. The same greed that took everything from her had taken everything from Lindau too. That evening, as she sat by her window sipping tea, she whispered softly to herself. The money was never cursed. She smiled faintly, her eyes steady. The greed was. For the first time, she felt free, not because her mother had fallen, but because Amelie had finally risen above it all. Months later, Amelie walked into a grand ballroom in Johannesburg, where the biggest investors' conference of the year was being held. Flashing cameras followed her every move, and people stood to applaud as she entered. The same business world that once ignored her now waited eagerly to hear her speak. She was no longer the daughter of someone powerful, she was the power. Her brand, Rooted Wealth, had become a household name across Africa. Her talks about money, honesty, and rebuilding from loss had inspired millions. People didn't just see her as a financial expert, they saw her as proof that you could fall, rise again, and own your story. As she walked toward the stage, wearing a sleek white suit and calm confidence, she felt the weight of her journey behind every step. The lights dimmed slightly as she took the microphone. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady and warm. The room went silent. "When I started my journey, I had nothing but a laptop, a little faith, and a very painful lesson." Laughter rippled softly through the crowd. They all knew her story by now. She continued, "I learned that money isn't power. Knowledge is. Integrity is. The rest comes and goes." Halfway through her speech, as she scanned the audience, her breath caught for a moment. In the far back row, sitting alone, was her mother. Lindau. Her once polished aura was gone. She looked smaller somehow, older, tired, almost fragile. Their eyes met briefly, and for the first time in years, Amelie didn't feel anger, just understanding. She paused mid-sentence, the room waiting for her next words. Then, with a faint smile, she said, "We often lose what's fake to make space for what's real." The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras flashed brighter, capturing her calm expression as her mother lowered her head quietly. Amelie finished her speech strong, talking about rebuilding wealth through trust, education, and integrity. When she stepped off the stage, investors rushed to shake her hand, journalists asked for quotes, and young women lined up to take photos with her. But her eyes drifted once more to the back of the room. Lindau was still sitting there, hands clasped tightly, tears in her eyes. She didn't try to approach her daughter. She just watched, as if realizing too late what real power looked like. That night, as Amelie drove back to her hotel, the applause still echoed in her mind. She looked out at the Johannesburg skyline glowing under the night sky and smiled softly. The power had shifted, not through revenge, but through growth. She had turned her pain into purpose, and that was something her mother could never steal. After the conference ended, the crowd slowly cleared, leaving behind the soft hum of conversations and flashing cameras. Amelie was surrounded by reporters and investors, everyone praising her speech and wanting a piece of her time. But through the noise, she saw someone standing quietly near the exit. Her mother. Lindau looked almost unrecognizable. The woman who once commanded rooms with her confidence now seemed small and lost. Her elegant clothes hung loosely on her frame, and the sharpness in her eyes had faded into something fragile, regret. Amelie felt her chest tighten but stayed still, waiting. When their eyes met, Lindau hesitated, then slowly walked toward her. The people around Amelie stepped aside instinctively, sensing the tension. Lindau stopped just a few feet away, her voice trembling. "Amelie," she whispered, "I made a mistake." Her hands shook as she tried to reach for her daughter. "I thought I was protecting what your father built. I was wrong. I've lost everything." Amelie stood silent, studying her mother. She saw the same woman who once smiled as she signed away her inheritance, the same woman who told her she didn't deserve what she had earned. But now all that pride was gone. "Help me, please," Lindau said softly, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to do anymore." For a moment, Amelie almost felt the old instinct, to comfort her, to fix things like she used to when she was a little girl. But then the memories rushed back. The lies, the betrayal, the years she spent rebuilding herself from nothing while her mother lived in luxury. She took a slow breath, keeping her voice calm. "You taught me something once," she said quietly. "You told me to never beg." Lindau blinked, realizing what was coming, tears spilling down her cheeks. Amelie looked her mother in the eye, her tone firm but not cruel. I'm just doing what you asked. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the conference faded into the background until it was just the two of them standing in a heavy silence. Lindi reached out again, but Amelie stepped back gently. "Goodbye, Mama," she said softly. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the floor, her posture tall and steady. Behind her, Lindi stood frozen, surrounded by the echoes of everything she had lost. Not just the money, but the one person who had once loved her unconditionally. Amelie didn't look back. She didn't need to. The reckoning had already happened, and this time it wasn't about revenge. It was about peace. And as she stepped outside into the night air, she finally felt free. Years later, Amelie stood outside a tall glass building with a simple gold sign that read the Duma Trust. The air was warm, and the sound of cameras clicking filled the space around her. This was the official launch of her foundation, an organization dedicated to helping women protect their money, their rights, and their independence. She had built it in honor of her late father, the man whose lessons she finally understood. Inside, women from all walks of life gathered: students, single mothers, small business owners. Amelie spoke with each of them, listening to their stories, offering advice, and reminding them that financial freedom was more than numbers. It was self-respect. After the event, a journalist approached her, notebook in hand. "Amelie," he asked, "everyone knows your story. But I have to ask, do you forgive your mother?" Amelie paused for a moment, looking out the window at the city skyline glowing in the evening light. She smiled softly and said, "I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, but I thank her. Without her betrayal, I would never have built my own fortune." The journalist nodded quietly, understanding the weight behind her words. As Amelie left the building, the sun was setting, washing the sky in shades of gold and orange. The light touched her face, warm and calm, like a sign of peace. She took a deep breath, feeling proud, not of the money she had gained, but of the woman she had become. Sometimes, she thought, losing everything is exactly what it takes to win it all. Then she smiled, got into her car, and drove toward her next chapter, strong, free, and finally, home within herself.